Picture this: a kid from San Bernardino, California, with no industry connections, no famous relatives, no drama school pedigree, walks into Hollywood and ends up with an Oscar nomination, a critically acclaimed role in one of the most celebrated television series of the past decade, and a net worth sitting at an estimated $4 million. That's the LaKeith Stanfield story, and if you think you already know it, I promise you, you don't. Most people know his face, fewer know his name, and almost nobody knows the full arc of how a young man from a struggling household in Southern California became one of the most magnetic and unpredictable actors working in Hollywood today. We're talking about a performer so committed to his craft that directors actively seek him out not because he fits a mold, but precisely because he refuses to. We're talking about someone who earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor before most people his age had even figured out their career paths. What did it take? What doors slammed in his face before the right ones opened? How does someone go from a difficult childhood with no entertainment industry roadmap to sharing screen space with Daniel Kaluuya in a prestige film, starring in Donald Glover's boundary-breaking Atlanta, and building a production company infrastructure that signals he's playing a very long game? That's exactly what we're going to break down today, in full detail. By the time this video is over, you'll understand not just where LaKeith Stanfield's $4 million net worth comes from, but how a young man shaped by hardship, instinct, and an almost reckless level of artistic fearlessness managed to carve out a space in Hollywood that nobody else could have filled. This is a story about talent meeting strategy, and about a very specific kind of quiet power that the entertainment industry doesn't always know what to do with, until it absolutely has to reckon with it. Let's start at the beginning. LaKeith Lee Stanfield was born on August 12, 1991, in San Bernardino, California. That makes him a Leo, and anyone who's followed his career trajectory will find something fitting in that. There's an undeniable magnetism to the man, a sense that when he enters a scene, something is about to happen. His upbringing, however, was far from the glamorous associations the Leo archetype might suggest. San Bernardino in the early 1990s was a city dealing with serious economic pressure. Manufacturing jobs had dried up, poverty rates were climbing. The kinds of safety nets that middle-class families in other parts of California took for granted were not always accessible in the neighborhoods where Stanfield grew up. His family situation was complicated in ways that shaped him deeply. LaKeith was raised by his mother, and the household navigated genuine financial instability for much of his childhood. He has spoken in interviews about not always having consistent access to the things other kids had. What he did have was an interior life, an imagination, and an emotional sensitivity that made him different from his peers, in ways he couldn't fully articulate as a child, but that would eventually become his greatest professional asset. His exposure to performance and storytelling came not through formal channels, but through the scattered, organic way things tend to happen in working-class households when nobody is mapping out a child's path to Hollywood. He watched films, he absorbed stories, he was drawn to characters who felt real, who carried weight, who didn't perform emotion, but seemed to genuinely inhabit it. Whether he could have named that quality as a child is debatable. What's clear is that something was being calibrated in him from an early age. School was not always an easy environment for Stanfield. He wasn't the kid who dominated drama club or starred in every school production. His path to performance was quieter than that, less institutional. He did participate in theatre at various points during his school years, and it was in those spaces, the low-stakes, exploratory, sometimes chaotic world of school productions, that he began to understand that something happened when he stepped in front of an audience. Something clicked, his teachers noticed it, and more importantly, he noticed it in himself. The family sacrifices made to support his growing interest in acting were real. His mother, navigating limited financial resources, didn't necessarily have the means to enroll him in elite performing arts programs or ship him off to expensive workshops. What support he received was more fundamental than that. The kind of emotional backing that tells a kid his dream isn't foolish, that his instincts are worth following. That foundation matters more than any workshop. By his teenage years, Stanfield was moving with purpose, even if that purpose wasn't always visible to people around him. He was forming his artistic identity in the way that genuinely original performers often do, through observation, through absorption, through a quiet intensity that doesn't broadcast itself, but never really switches off. The move toward a professional career wasn't going to come through a traditional pipeline. It was going to require something more improvised, more direct, and more gutsy. The story of how LaKeith Stanfield got his first significant role in one of those Hollywood anecdotes that sound almost implausible until you trace it back to the specific circumstances that made it possible. He was around 19 years old, relatively unknown, without an agent in the traditional sense, when he essentially walked into the orbit of filmmaker Ryan Coogler. This connection led to a role in Coogler's short film that began generating real attention and put Stanfield on the radar of people who were paying attention to the next wave of talent. Before any of that, though, there were the years of grinding that don't get discussed as much. The years of showing up, of being broke, of taking whatever work came along while keeping the larger dream alive. Stanfield wasn't doing the classic Los Angeles waiter/actor hustle, the most glamorized sense of that term. His circumstances were more precarious than that. He was young, he didn't have a lot of money, and he was navigating a city that chews through aspiring performers at a rate that would discourage most people within the first few months. Auditions were a particular kind of education. Every casting room tells you something about how the industry sees you, and for a young black actor with Stanfield's unusual energy, quiet but volatile, still but electric, the messages weren't always encouraging. He was too intense for some roles, not commercial enough for others. The kinds of parts he was drawn to weren't the kinds of parts that were being written in abundance for young actors who looked like him. The industry had certain slots available, and Stanfield didn't fit neatly into any of them. That awkward fit, which might have felt like rejection at the time, turned out to be the seed of everything. Because when the right director came along looking for someone who didn't fit the usual template, Stanfield was exactly what they needed. Ryan Coogler's Fruitvale Station, released in 2013, is the film that introduced LaKeith Stanfield to audiences who were paying serious attention. The film tells the true story of Oscar Grant, the young black man killed by a BART police officer in Oakland on New Year's Day 2009. Stanfield played a pivotal role, and while the film's emotional center belonged to Michael B. Jordan as Oscar Grant, Stanfield's presence announced something unmistakable. Here was an actor who could do more with a single look than most could do with a monologue. The film won the Grand Jury Prize and the Audience Award at Sundance. Critics and industry insiders took note. What made this breakthrough different from a standard Hollywood success story was the nature of the film itself. This wasn't a commercial blockbuster that made Stanfield a household name overnight. Fruitvale Station was a prestige independent film with deep moral and social weight. The audience that discovered Stanfield through this film was exactly the audience that was going to follow his subsequent choices with genuine investment. These were people who cared about craft, who were watching for what came next. What came next was a series of choices that demonstrated something important about Stanfield's instincts. He was not going to chase the obvious path. He took roles that interested him other than roles that were simply bigger or louder. He appeared in short-term 12 in a supporting capacity. He kept building a body of work that prioritized quality and authenticity over mainstream visibility, which was a strategic gamble that would take several years to fully pay off financially, but that was building something invaluable in the meantime, a reputation for artistic seriousness. The television world provided the breakthrough that truly expanded his audience. In 2016, Donald Glover's Atlanta premiered on FX, and with it came one of the most distinctive ensemble casts in recent television history. Stanfield played Darius, the philosophical, slightly otherworldly friend of the show's central characters. Darius is a character who lives slightly outside the logic of the world around him, perceptive, strange, funny in a deadpan way that somehow never tips into caricature. He's the kind of character that demands extraordinary restraint from an actor, because the temptation to play the quirks broadly is constant, and the whole point of Darius is that his strangeness comes from somewhere genuine, not from performance. Stanfield played him beautifully over the show's multiple seasons. Darius became a fan favorite and a critical touchstone, and Stanfield's work on the show became one of the most discussed performances in prestige television. Atlanta won the Golden Globe for Best Television Series in the comedy category. It became a cultural phenomenon, the kind of show that people referenced in conversations about what television could actually do when it was operating at the highest level of ambition. And Stanfield was central to why it worked. The financial reality of Atlanta, while significant, was only part of the equation. What the show did more broadly was make LaKeith Stanfield's face and name recognizable to a mainstream audience that hadn't caught Fruitvale Station or his earlier work. Suddenly, people knew him. Suddenly, casting directors who had been filing him away in the interesting, but where do we put him category had a context for his abilities that made the case for his commercial viability. This opened doors to larger projects. Get Out, Jordan Peele's 2017 cultural phenomenon, featured Stanfield in a brief but memorable role, the opening scene, in fact, which sets the film's tone of dread and disorientation with chilling precision. Get Out went on to earn over $250 million at the global box office against a budget of around $4.5 million. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. It became one of the most discussed films of its decade. Being part of that, even in a limited capacity, placed Stanfield inside one of the defining cinematic events of the era. The roles kept coming, and they kept being interesting. Knives Out in 2019, Rian Johnson's whodunit that earned significant commercial success and critical praise. Sorry to Bother You in 2018, the surrealist satire from Boots Riley in which Stanfield carried the entire film as a lead, a tour de force performance in a movie that was genuinely unlike anything else being made at the time. These choices reveal a performer who is deeply intentional about the company he keeps artistically. He gravitates toward filmmakers with specific visions, toward material that challenges assumptions, toward stories that don't explain themselves to the audience in advance. But the career achievement that represents the clearest convergence of critical recognition, industry respect, and awards attention came in 2021 with Judas and the Black Messiah. Directed by Shocker King, the film tells the story of Fred Hampton, the charismatic chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, who was assassinated in 1969, and his FBI informant William O'Neill. Daniel Kaluuya played Fred Hampton in a performance that won him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Stanfield played William O'Neill, the informant, a morally complex, deeply human portrayal of a man trapped in an impossible situation, making choices under duress that cost another man his life. The performance earned Stanfield an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Let that land for a moment. He was nominated for the same Oscar as his co-star. Both performers in the same film, playing against each other in scenes of extraordinary dramatic tension, both recognized by the Academy as among the finest acting performances of the year. Kaluuya won, but the nomination alone placed Stanfield in a conversation that permanently altered how the industry perceived his ceiling. What the nomination represented financially is worth examining. An Oscar nomination does not come with a check, but it comes with something that translates into checks, leverage. Post-nomination, a performer's asking price for studio projects increases substantially. their ability to attract projects they want to make increases. Their visibility with producers, studios, and streaming platforms sharpens. The nomination is, in the Hollywood economy, a signal that carries real monetary weight. Now let's talk about the money itself, and how the estimated $4 million net worth breaks down in a way that makes sense when you trace the career arc. Stanfield's salary progression follows a pattern common to prestige actors who build through independent film and television before crossing into studio territory. The early years were not lucrative in the conventional sense. Fruitvale Station, as an independent film with a modest budget, did not make anyone rich. Short-Term 12, similarly, was a critically lauded independent production running on a tight financial model. These films built reputation and relationships. They did not build bank accounts. Atlanta changed the financial picture meaningfully. A series' regular role on an FX series, particularly one that became as celebrated and renewed as Atlanta, provides stable, meaningful income over multiple seasons. The specifics of Stanfield's deal have not been made fully public, but television series regular compensation for a show at that level, across multiple seasons and episodes, represents a substantial income stream that forms a real foundation. The film work post-Atlanta commanded higher fees. Knives Out had a production budget reported at $40 million, and while not all of that flows to cast, the ensemble's compensation reflected the film's commercial ambitions. Sorry to Bother You gave Stanfield his first lead role, carrying a feature film, even on an independent budget. The lead actor's compensation is categorically different from supporting work. The Judas and the Black Messiah compensation, combined with the Oscar campaign and nomination, placed him in a category of actor who can command genuine studio rates. Films at the studio level, with budgets in the range that those projects occupy, involve cast fees that can run from the low hundreds of thousands to multi-million-dollar deals, depending on the actor's profile and the project's needs. The $4 million figure, verified through sources, including celebrity net worth estimates, reflects the accumulated earnings from roughly a decade of consistent, ascending work across film and television, combined with the initial stages of building a business infrastructure around that work. It is not the wealth of an A-list franchise star. It is the wealth of an actor who has built deliberately, chosen quality over scale, and is now positioned at the inflection point where the financial returns begin to match the artistic recognition. What's strategically important about Stanfield's financial position is what he's doing with it. The production company interest that forms part of his wealth-building strategy reflects an understanding that actors who remain only actors are ultimately dependent on what others choose to create and offer them. Producers have a fundamentally different relationship to Hollywood's financial ecosystem. They develop material, they control IP, they take different risks, but also access different rewards. The movement toward production company formation is a pattern you see across serious actors at a certain career stage. It happened with Denzel Washington's Monday Lane Entertainment. It happened with Kerry Washington's Simpson Street. The logic is consistent. At a certain point, the most talented and ambitious performers recognize that the stories they want to tell aren't always going to be brought to them by studios. They need to build the infrastructure to originate those stories themselves. For Stanfield, whose artistic sensibility tends toward the unconventional and the challenging, production capacity is particularly valuable. The kinds of stories he seems drawn to, morally complex, socially engaged, formally adventurous, are not always the projects that get greenlit through conventional studio development. Having his own production infrastructure means he can develop material that fits his vision and attach himself strategically rather than waiting for the right project to appear. The real estate component of his wealth, while not as extensively documented as some of his higher-earning peers, reflects a standard wealth-building approach for Los Angeles-based entertainment professionals. Property in Southern California, particularly acquired in the mid-range of the market before recent appreciation curves, represents significant asset value. The specific details of Stanfield's property holdings are not extensively public, but his overall financial picture includes real estate as a component of the broader portfolio. His investment approach appears to be relatively conservative compared to the more aggressive celebrity ventures you see from higher-earning peers. He hasn't been publicly associated with the kind of sprawling business empire that some of his contemporaries have attempted to build. This is not necessarily a limitation. Strategic focus and discipline in financial management often outperforms flashy diversification, particularly at the $4 million level, where protecting and growing existing capital are more important than headline-grabbing ventures. As of early 2025, Stanfield continues to be among the more active and sought-after performers of his generation. His slate of upcoming work builds on the Oscar nomination in ways that are both commercially and artistically ambitious. He has continued to take roles that reflect his commitment to material with genuine weight and originality, while also demonstrating a growing willingness to operate at scales that generate the kind of commercial visibility that translates directly into larger paychecks. The television presence remains active. Atlanta, which wrapped after its final season, represented a completed chapter of his television career, a chapter that established him as one of the most compelling ensemble performers on the prestige television landscape. What comes next in television represents a significant financial opportunity, because the streaming era has created compensation structures for established performers that rival and sometimes exceed film rates. His production company activities, while not extensively detailed in public reporting as of early 2025, are in the development phase that typically precedes the kind of announcements that change a performer's industry profile. The transition from actor to actor-producer is not instantaneous. It requires building a development infrastructure, acquiring rights to properties, hiring creative development staff, and establishing studio or streaming relationships that allow produced content to find its audience. Stanfield appears to be in the active construction phase of that transition. Personal life details, as is consistent with his general approach to privacy, are not extensively documented. He has been in relationships that have occasionally entered the public record, and he has spoken in interviews about the challenges of maintaining genuine personal connection when your professional life operates at the level of visibility that he has reached. He approaches the work-life balance question with the same thoughtfulness he brings to role selection, deliberately, on his own terms. The future career goals that emerge from Stanfield's public statements and career pattern suggest someone who is thinking in decades rather than release cycles. He has expressed interest in directing, which would represent a natural extension of the creative control instincts that already manifest in his production company investment. He has shown interest in the kinds of international and art house projects that don't necessarily generate massive domestic box office, but that expand an actor's global profile and artistic range. He seems genuinely uninterested in the kind of franchise commitment that dominates much of Hollywood's current economic model, which is both a philosophical choice and a strategic one. Franchise actors can earn enormous sums, but often at the cost of the creative flexibility that defines his current brand. What can aspiring actors and creatives take from the Stanfield model? The lessons are both encouraging and demanding. The first is the power of authentic differentiation. Stanfield did not succeed by figuring out what Hollywood wanted and then becoming that thing. He succeeded by being so specifically and uncompromisingly himself that the industry eventually had to figure out what to do with him. That's a harder path in the short term and a more durable one in the long term. When you're irreplaceable, because there's literally no one else who does what you do the way you do it, your career has a different kind of resilience than if you're one of many people competing for the same types of roles. The second is the wisdom of building relationships through quality work. Almost every major opportunity in Stanfield's career has come through a prior relationship or a recommendation from a prior collaborator. Fruitvale Station led to subsequent relationships that opened further doors. Atlanta put him in Donald Glover's orbit, which expanded his network in ways that continue to generate opportunity. Jordan Peele's Get Out came through the web of relationships that his Fruitvale presence helped build. Quality work in service of genuine creative visions generates the kind of professional goodwill that agents cannot manufacture and money cannot buy. The third lesson is patience with the financial curve. Stanfield spent nearly a decade doing work that was artistically significant before the financial returns matched the artistic recognition. Most people cannot sustain that gap. It requires a genuine belief in the long game, a willingness to make decisions that prioritize artistic integrity over immediate financial optimization. It also requires some basic financial survival, being smart about money when you don't have much of it, living within your means, so that you can afford to keep saying no to the wrong things and yes to the right things. The fourth lesson is the importance of thinking beyond performance from relatively early in your career. The production company instinct, the interest in developing and controlling material, the understanding that the most powerful position in the entertainment industry belongs to creators and producers rather than performers. These are insights that actors who build lasting wealth internalize earlier rather than later. Stanfield's move toward production infrastructure is a sign of industry sophistication that positions him well for the next phase of his career. His impact on Hollywood norms and representation conversations is real, even if understated. As a black actor who operates primarily in the prestige and independent space, whose career demonstrates that a certain kind of artistic seriousness is not only commercially viable but Oscar-worthy, he provides a model for the next generation of performers who don't want to choose between artistic integrity and industry recognition. He demonstrates that the choice doesn't have to be binary. The mentorship dimension of his career is still developing. He's not yet at the stage where he's publicly identified as a major mentor to younger performers, but the pattern of collaborative work with up-and-coming directors and writers suggests a generosity with his platform that tends to cycle back productively. Supporting bold independent work, as he has consistently done, creates the conditions for the next generation of ambitious filmmakers to operate, and that has a legacy dimension that transcends any individual project. The spiritual and philosophical evolution that Stanfield references in various interviews reflects a genuine engagement with questions about identity, purpose, and the relationship between personal authenticity and professional performance. He has spoken about the ways that playing certain roles has required him to access and process parts of his own experience, not in a self-indulgent way, but in the way that genuine acting requires. The William O'Neill role in Judas and the Black Messiah, for instance, demanded that he inhabit a profound moral complexity without either excusing the character or demonizing him. And that kind of performance leaves a mark. The fact that he seems to integrate those experiences thoughtfully rather than being destabilized by them suggests a psychological groundedness that will serve his career well across the long arc. Let's bring it home. LaKeith Stanfield, as of early 2025, has been professionally active for roughly 12 years. In that time, he has accumulated an estimated $4 million in net worth, earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his role in Judas and the Black Messiah, established himself as a series regular in one of the most critically acclaimed television series of its era in Atlanta, delivered a breakout performance in a film that went on to win the Best Picture Oscar in Get Out's director Jordan Peele's subsequent work, and positioned himself at the beginning of a production company trajectory that could substantially multiply his financial profile over the next decade. The $4 million is real, verified through multiple industry tracking sources, and it represents a mix of liquid earnings from film and television, real estate assets, and the early-stage value of his production infrastructure. Compared to the highest earners in Hollywood, it's a modest figure. Compared to where he started, a kid from San Bernardino with no industry connections and no roadmap. It represents the kind of trajectory that should make anyone paying attention take seriously what's still to come. The story of LaKeith Stanfield is not finished. It might, in fact, be in its most interesting chapter yet. The Oscar nomination raised his floor. The production company ambitions could raise his ceiling. The artistic instincts that have guided every choice he's made so far show no signs of dulling. And in a Hollywood that is simultaneously more desperate for genuine talent than ever before and more confused about how to develop and deploy that talent than it has been in decades, someone with Stanfield's combination of credibility, range, and strategic patience is genuinely well positioned. What's your favorite LaKeith Stanfield performance? Drop it in the comments, whether it's the haunting opening of Get Out, the philosophical depth of Darius in Atlanta, or the devastating moral complexity of William O'Neill. There's no wrong answer, and the conversation down there is always worth having. If you haven't subscribed yet, and you want more deep dives like this one, full career breakdowns, wealth analysis, and the real stories behind Hollywood's most interesting working actors, hit that subscribe button now. Our next video is going to pull back the curtain on another performer whose financial and artistic journey is just as surprising and just as instructive as this one. You're not going to want to miss it.